Welcome, everyone. So this week we're going to learn Parshas Vayakhel. But before we start, I would like to tell everyone that I get a mazel tov. That a few days ago I put out a new book. The book is called A Guide to the Guide. Now, if you know, all these weeks, many times I mention things from the Rambam and the Moreh Nevuchim. So it seems like I'm like an old expert in the Moreh Nevuchim. I'm not. Moreh Nevuchim is a very difficult sefer to read, and I tried many times, like 3 times, 4 times. I tried to learn Moreh Nevuchim, and I just couldn't get into it. It was so complicated. I just couldn't get into it. And I know many other people have had the same experience. It's just opaque. It's very hard to do it. So 6 years ago, I made a chavrusashaft with Yosef Chaim Cohn from Chicago, and we learned it for 5 years. We learned more. He had been through it a couple of times, so he was much more familiar than I was, and he sort of helped me get through it. And we learned it be'iyun for 5 years, and I can't say that I really know it now, but there's a lot of the Moreh Nevuchim which I've discovered, and which I mentioned these in these sessions. So I wrote up. What I did was I wrote a summary of every single chapter in the book. There are 170 something like that, 170 chapters, and I wrote a summary in my own words, in readable English, where I give the gist of what he says in every chapter, and therefore, so a person could read my book and get the idea of what the Moreh Nevuchim is about. All the things that he goes through: anthropomorphisms, prophecy, hashgacha, malachim, all questions of philosophy, the mitzvahs, everything. I just covered everything in a summary, and this is the book. It's called A Guide to the Guide, and that's what it is. It's a guide to the Sefer. It's not a translation of the Sefer. There are translations, and we learned off translations. We had 4 translations, but the translations those are the ones that are hard. I didn't learn it, and we never tried to learn it in the original Arabic. So it's either there's Ibn Tibin, there's Kapach and Friedlander and Pines, and all of them are very difficult to read. So, but this is what we did for 5 years, and I believe was really worth the effort. And I feel that this is really one of the important accomplishments of my life. Now, this book is available from Amazon, and I'm not only from Amazon. In the meantime, it's not available in stores. Now, the reason why I'm telling you this, it's not commercial. I'll tell you the story. I don't know if all of you know, but I wrote a series of 12 historical novels, the Strasbourg Saga, under the name Avner Gold. And I wrote them back in the 80s. And a few years ago, I rewrote them, and I republished them with ArtScroll. And when I rewrote them, I expanded them, I revised them, and I expanded them, made them much bigger, and I believe much better. So the first book is called The Promised Child. They were very popular books. And when the first revision of The Promised Child came out, so the new edition, so a younger man called me up, that he is from a kollel in Chicago. He called me up and he told me that the younger light in the kollel were talking that they all, they loved The Promised Child, the first one, and now they say there's a revision. Could it be as good as the old? Could it be maybe even better? They didn't know. They were speculating. So he went out and he bought a copy and he read it, and he called me up to tell me that he read it, that he loved it. It was definitely very superior to the previous one. So I told him, okay, so please go tell all your friends. So he says, yeah, my friends are all lined up to borrow it already. but the point is that I would rather sell 2,000 books and have 10,000 people read it than sell 5,000 books and have 1,000 people read it. The point is not about money. The point is about those books are full of hashkafa and divrei Torah and Jewish history, and my purpose. I'm not worried about parnassus. Don't worry, Hashem takes care of me. But the point is harbatzas Torah. So this is also, I'm interested in harbatzas Torah. That's what I want. This is my work. It was a tremendous amount of effort. I want to be marbids, the Torah of the Rambam, not only in halacha, but in Jewish thought and philosophy. And believe me, if any of you goes out to buy one book and lends it to 100 people, I'm thrilled. Okay, so the reason why I'm mentioning is I want to, if you go into your bookstores and you won't find it, and to me this was not in the bookstores yet. Right now it's only available on Amazon. If you look up Guide to the Guide, Reinman, you'll find it right away. Okay, that's that. Now let's get down to Tachlis. Parshas Vayakhel. So really, I want to speak about the Parsha, but at the end, there's something I want to speak about, which is really a very global issue, and I have like a thought on it, and I sent a letter to Rabbi Moshe Shapiro and to Chaim Kanievsky with my thought on this, and my son gave my letters to both of them. So Rabbi Moshe Shapiro went through it and he told them that he liked it very much. Didn't write me anything, but Rav Chaim Kanievsky wrote me a long letter. What does a long letter mean? My son is Rosh Chabura in the Mir, and one of his Yungalite had a question. He had a son, his name is Yeshaya. His name really Yeshaya or Yeshayahu? So he wrote a letter to Rav Chaim Kanievsky to ask him this question. He got back the letter and he looked at it and it was blank. He couldn't understand why you give him a blank letter. But then he looked closely, he saw a tiny black line. In other words, he was telling him it's with a vav. So Rav Chaim Kanievsky is extremely economical in the letters that he writes. My letter is 2 lines long, and I will show it to you later. Okay. Now, first thing I want to tell Zacham is this. It says that Vayasas kol klei mizbeiach, he made a mizbeiach, and he made all the klei mizbeiach, as asirois, hayoim, and mizrokos, or mizlogos, amachtois, asirois are pots, yoim, I don't know what they are, mizrokos are these sort of little pots they used to make zrika. This is forks, machtas, shovels, all these kalim. They made them, and they made them nechoshes. They were made of copper. And it says in Truma Taka that you have to, in Truma, the pasuk says that you should make it nechoshes. L'chol kelav tasen nechoshes, and that's what they did. They made it nechoshes. So the Maskell David asks from a Gemara in Yuma. He asks on the Gemara in Yuma. The Gemara says, Mishnah, it says, Avodah Yom Kippurim, B'chol Yoim, Hayechoyte b'shel kesef, u'ma'ara b'shel zav, b'toich shel zav. He used to take out the coals from mizbeiach for the mizbeiach haktoros with a silver keli and a gold keli. V'hayoim, and on Yom Kippur, he didn't use silver. V'hayoim chayte b'shel zav v'boy machnes. He used to, every day they used to take the coals with a silver shovel, put it into a gold keli, and that they took inside. And on Yom Kippur, then he used to shovel it with gold and take it in with the keli with which he took. So these were the klei mizbeiach, and they were in gold and silver. And it says that there has to be nechoshes. So yes, the kasha. How could that be? Okay, so I want to address that question. So it says like this. The pasuk tells us that he made the mizbeiach, and he made the kalim. Then he made the michbar, was like the band that went around the mizbeiach, and then he made rings, and he put in the badim. And now before by the shulchan, it says that he made the shulchan, and then he made the rings, and made the badim, and he put in the badim, and then he made the kalim. So by shulchan it says he made the kalim. After he made the whole shulchan, he made the rings. I mean, you would think we make the rings and the badim to carry it means the shulchan is finished, and he made the rings, and then the kalim is a different thing. Then he made the kalim. But mizbeiach it says the opposite. First it says that he made the kalim, then he made the badim, and only then he made the rings and he put in the badim. So what's the difference? I want to say the difference like this: that the shulchan, the function of the shulchan, is passive. The shulchan is just there to stand there looking pretty. The shulchan, it's gold sides and shelves, and there's the lechem aponim on it. There's no active avodah in the shulchan. The shulchan is just to be there. By the mizbeiach, the mizbeiach is the place where the avodah is done. So the function of the kalim by the shulchan really has nothing to do. It's only like a machshir. It's only to be able to put something on, so you need kalim. But the shulchan itself does not function with kalim. It functions just by standing there. The mizbeiach, on the other hand, functions with kalim. You have the avodas with zrika, so you need a mizrak. You have to take the coals, you have to take your machta, everything. You need mizlogos, because aktorah is, you have aktorah, so you need the forks to turn them over to make sure everything burns well. So the kalim are part of the function of the mizbeiach. So therefore, by the shulchan, first he tells you, so the kalim are not part of the shulchan. They're not part of it. They're just a side thing that you need for the shulchan. So first he tells you the whole shulchan, and you make the rings, and you make the badim, and then he tells you about the kalim, which are there to, because for practicality, you need kalim. But they're not part of the shulchan, so it doesn't belong there when you're talking about making the shulchan. Making the rings and the badim, that's the completion of the shulchan, and afterwards we tell us about the kalim. But mizbeiach, on the other hand, the kalim are part of the mizbeiach. They belong to the mizbeiach. The whole function of mizbeiach is the platform and the kalim. That's what the mizbeiach is. They're part of the mizbeiach. Therefore, first he tells you make the mizbeiach, then he tells you make the kalim, and then he tells you that they're badim. So if the kalim are part of the mizbeiach, so therefore, if the mizbeiach is nechayshes, then the kalim have to be nechayshes. But that was in the Mishkan, where the mizbeiach was nechayshes. But in the Bin Olamim, in the Beis Hamikdash, the mizbeiach was not nechayshes. It was avonim. It wasn't made of copper. It was made of stone. So therefore, the kalim are no longer, not going to make the kalim of stone, so what are you going to make it of? So you make it of gold and silver. You make it of the best. So this mitzvah to make it of the chayshes was only in the Mishkan, where the mizbeiach is the chayshes, therefore the kalim also have to be in the chayshes. In the Mishnah and Yuma, they don't have to be in the chayshes. Another point, before I get to the Chaim Kanievsky, it says at the end, V'yas es abadim Atzei shitim, vayitzav es nechayshes. V'yoves abam t'bois al l'seisois and bohem, nevuv luchos asa oisoi. The end of this, of the pasha of the mizbeiach, it says he made it nevuv luchos. What does that mean? It was made of a frame, but the interior was hollow. The interior was hollow. So that's how you made it. It wasn't a solid piece. It was made of, like Rashi says, halucha shalatzes shitim l'chol ruach. You have boards of cedar wood. No, it's not cedar wood. It's shitim on each side, and the cholol bem. So the middle was hollow. That's how you made it. So that's how you make the mizbeiach. It should be there by the making the mizbeiach. Why is it all the way at the end, after everything is over? That after you finished tabas and everything and you made it, then the pasuk tells us that the mizbeiach was hollow. And it's the same thing in Truma, the same thing. It's all the way at the end. So let's see a shot like this. Why is it hollow? So there could be two reasons for this. One reason, Pashat, is because if the mizbeiach was solid, it would be extremely, extremely heavy, so you wouldn't be able to carry it. So that's what it could be. I saw this reason somewhere. But there's also a medrash that says that it symbolizes the hollowness of the people who are chayte by the egel. So the mizbeiach is mechaper, so saying that these people were hollow, and therefore the mizbeiach has to be hollow. So the hollowness of the mizbeiach was a reduction in the mizbeiach. It was not part of the construction of the mizbeiach. Mizbeiach really should have been solid, but it was reduced to be hollow. Therefore, is brought afterwards because it's part of it detracts from mizbeiach. It's not part of the binyan of mizbeiach. That's why it says all the way at the end. Okay. Now I'll get to the topic that I wrote Reb Chaim about. In the Torah, you see in the Gemara, every extra vav, the Gemara will darshan, what does the vav mean? And he was like this. And how does he learn the vav? And he learned the vav. And what is this? Every ois, everything. People will darshan every kutzah shel yud. Everything has to have a value, a meaning. And here you have a parsha of Truma and Tetzaveh, and in Vayakhel and Pikudei, it is repeating. Hundreds of pesukim are repeated. What's the purpose? Why are you repeating all these pesukim? It says in the Torah that the Rebbeinu Shalom told Noach that he should build a teva, and he gave him the exact dimensions. Make it like this. See this, everything. Exact dimensions. And at the end it says, "Vayas Noach kashet tzivah Hashem." That was it. We know the instructions. Noach did what Hashem told him, so we know what he did. It doesn't say, and then Noach went and he did this and he did that. Because it's just repetitive. Why be repetitive? It just says, "Vayas Noach kashet tzivah Hashem." So why don't you say over here also, "Vayas Moshe kashet tzivah Hashem"? Why don't you say that? Vayakhel is about the binyan of the mizbeiach of the Mishkan. Pekudei is a repetition of the big day kahuna. Shmini is a repetition of the karbonos of miluim. Are repeated. It says already before that in Tetzaveh all the karbonos of miluim. It's repeated in Shmini. Everything is repeated. Why? To show chashivas. Okay, chashiva is very important, but with a sheer, with an extent. Why hundreds of pesukim are repeated? And then there's the other thing, which is like in Parshas Nosai, you have 6 pesukim, the matanas of the Nesiim, 6 pesukim, Karbonei Kars Kesef Achas, everybody knows. Again and again, 12 times these 6 pesukim are repeated. What is the purpose of that? What is the purpose? There's a lot of Torah on it, but what's the purpose? To me, that is the biggest raya to Torah ben Hashemayim, the part of Nosai. Not even Nakam Pekudei, Nosai. 6 pesukim consecutively, repeated the exact same pesukim 12 times, again and again and again and again, again and again. Like, why? So a human being who is coming to falsify and create a fictional Torah and make believe that it's real and to write a Torah would never do such a thing. Nobody would do such a thing. It must be min hashamayim. Now why? I don't know. We have to know why. But this to me is the biggest raya to Torah min hashamayim. Because what person in his right mind would do this? And so it can't be a person; it must be min hashamayim. And there's some kind of a das elyon over a reason why you do this. But what is it? Why so many times? So I wanted to suggest pshat. It's a little bit, usually I try to say things al derech hapshat very much. This is also a derech hapshat, but it's a little bit get into higher things. Like I mentioned, a Zohar. So, it's in Parshas Bereshis, the Ramban says that it's impossible to understand what happened in Parshas Bereshis. You read the pesukim, and from the pesukim you're going to try to figure out what happened by Sheish Mei Bereshis. It's impossible. So the question is, if it's impossible to figure it out, why didn't the Torah just say Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim v'aretz b'shisha yomim u'v'yom hashvi shovas v'yinafash? If you can't know what it means anyway, so why is it there? So I want to suggest like this. There's a famous Zohar. famous Zohar says that the Rebbe Shalom wanted to create a world. Mistakel ba'iraisa ubaralei. So he was mistakel ba'iraisa bara alma. Everybody knows the Zohar. You don't have to be a Baki in Zohar to know the Zohar, and neither am I. But mistakel ba'iraisa, it's in Parshas Toldos. So mistakel ba'iraisa bara alma. So normally when you hear the Zohar mentioned, the language is that the Torah is a blueprint for the world. But I don't think that's what it means. What is a blueprint? The Rebbe Shalom made a blueprint, and then when he went to create the world, he looked in the blueprint. Why does he have to look in the blueprint? It's not what it means. What it means is that Istakel B'Raisa Bar Alma means that he created the world through the Torah. The Torah is what created the world. Hu Amar Vayehi. The Rebbe Shalom spoke the Mamoras, and the Maimer created the world. That Maimer was Torah. So Torah is the instrument of the creation of the world. Not that he looked and then he went to create. The Torah created the world. He looked in the Torah and he used the Torah, he activated the Torah, and the Torah created the world. There's another Zohar in Parshas Truma that says, Istakel b'raisa bora alma, uvairaisa isberi alma. That the world was created in the Torah. The Torah is the place where the world was created, was in the Torah. So Bereshit, the Rebbe Shalom created the world. The reason why it says is because that's where the Brias Olam is happening in the pesukim of Bereshit. This is the Torah that's creating the world. These Maimarim, these pesukim, and the Rebbe Shalom said, Yehi Rakia, when he said that Amira created it, and it's in the Torah. So if it wouldn't say, if we say Bereshit Bar Lakim, it's a Shmaim for Sa'ora, it's a V'yem Yishavas Nafash, and the Yehi Rakia wouldn't say in the Torah, then it wouldn't create the world. It has to be in the Torah, because the Torah creates the world. The instrument of the creation was the Torah. That's why it says every pasuk, even though we don't understand what happened, it's not like we would figure out. We don't know what happened. We don't know the process. We don't understand. We can read it and read it and read it, and we'll never figure it out. But it says there because that's where it happened. That's why it says there. Noach didn't build a teva in the Torah. He built it on the street. And the Rebbe Shalom gave it tzivur. The Rebbe Shalom is telling us, the Torah is telling a story. There's a lot of narration, a lot of narrative in the Torah. So the Torah is telling us what happened with Noach, and Noach was told to build a teva, and Yas Noach, Kashiva is Hashem. He built it. But it doesn't have to say the actual construction of the teva in the Torah, because it's not being created in the Torah. It's being created on the street. Noach is building on the street. So Vayas Kashatziva Hashem, that's enough. You don't need more. But Mashenka, the Brias Olam, happened in the Torah. Now there's a medrash that says, let me see 1 second. This is something else. Okay, the Medrash says, here's the Medrash. So at the end of Parshas Nosoi, the Medrash says, Omer, after everything was finished, Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Yikosev Shebiyoim Zeh Nivra HaOlam. Creation of the Mishkan, the creation of a mokem for Hashras Hashchena, was the hashlam of the Bria. Until now, the Bria was only the Gashmi. There was no mokem in the world. A mokem for the Hashras Hashchena wasn't there. But you built the Mishkan, then building the Mishkan was the creation of a mokem for Hashras Hashchena, and that was the hashlam of the Bria Sa'olam. So just like in the Bria Sa'olam, the original Gashmi is the Gebriya Sa'olam. There's a Istakel B'Raisa Bara Alma that is created through the Torah. So in the Binyan HaMishkan, you also have a Istakel B'Raisa Bara Alma that the Torah is the instrument of the creation of the Mishkan. Therefore, every single step that it takes every single step of the process has to be in the Torah. When the Rebbeinu Shalom gave the tzivui to Moshe, that tzivui has to be in the Torah. Otherwise it wouldn't work. That has to be in the Torah. The next step was that Moshe went and he told it to Klal Yisrael. That also is in the Torah. That Moshe told Klal Yisrael. The next step, or whoever he told it to, Vayakhel, he told the Klal Yisrael. And the next step was to actually do it. So that also has to be in the Torah. The entire process has to be in the Torah. Every board, every tzipuzov, everything has to be in the Torah. Because if it wouldn't be in the Torah, it would not be effective. I mean, you could put together the boards, but it wouldn't create a makam of Hashras HaShechina. It needs the koyach HaTorah to make it a makam of Hashras HaShechina. Therefore, every pasuk has to be here. Every baton of the Nesiim was part of the Binyan HaMishkan. Every carbon that was brought, putting on the begodim onto Aaron, everything in the process, from the beginning till the very end, till the end of the Yemei HaMiluim, everything that happened during that process was the Binyan HaMishkan, and every single thing that happened in that process has to be in the Torah for order for it to be effective to create a makam of Hashras HaShechina. If it would just say, this is the carbon of Nachshon Aminadav, and chain this one, then the second matana wouldn't be part of the Binyan. It would just be, the Torah is telling us a story that this one brought something like that. But the actual matana that the second Nasi brought would not appear in the Torah, and therefore it wouldn't be able to be part of the process of creating a makam for Hashras HaShechina. This is what I wanted to say, and this will explain all the repetitions, because every single thing that happened has to appear in the Torah. That would be Estakel Baraisa Bar Alma. That would be Baraisa Isbri Alma. The Torah was created. The world was created through the Torah. So I sent this to Rav Chaim Kanievsky, and he sent me back this letter. 2 lines. Now, the 2 lines. I said like this. He gives a mashal. I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's in Vayikra. So he said, "B'shah shamar leHakadosh Baruch Hu leMoshe aseh li mishkan al kol davar v'davar shaya oiseh haya kaisev alav kasher tziva Hashem es Moshe. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu kol hakoved ze'os li Moshe v'ani b'bifnim b'chutz karlo sheikonos l'fnai l'fnem kach nemar Vayikra el Moshe." So he says that every that's what, this is, he doesn't have the lashon. He says, "B'chazal isa shemoshe kosav shmoi shal HaKadosh Baruch Hu al kol davar v'davar k'moshe kosav kashiv Hashem es Moshe maybe mashal." This is what he sent me. So I'm assuming that he's agreeing, that he's saying that that's the pshat in that medrash, that the Shem of the Rebbeinu Shalom has to be on, meaning the Torah. What does the Shem of the Rebbeinu Shalom mean? That it's the Torah. So every single thing that he did has to have the stempel of the Shmoi Shal HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that is the Torah, and therefore, Vibal is the Torah, it can be effective to create a Makam Hashras HaShechina, and without the repetition, it would only be a narrative, it would only tell us that Vayas Moshe kan tzivos Hashem, so the only thing that appears in the Torah is the tzivoi. The Asiyah would not appear in the Torah, and therefore the Asiyah would not be able to be part of the process, and therefore it would not have been successful in creating the Mishkan, the Makam Hashras HaShechina. Thank you very much. I appreciate you listening, and I hope to see you next week.